Hey there, everyone. In today's class, we're going to look at a special topic. Um, this is the Biotechnology series in genetics. So there'll be two different topics. One is genetically modified organisms, and the other one will be cloning. So let's take a look at genetically modified organisms. At the beginning, there are natural ways of selecting genes, okay, in which nature chooses what kind of gene should be passed on to the next generation. And then with humans, beginning with agriculture, humans have developed their own ways of selecting certain genes that they wanted from certain types of crops. So when this happens, okay, when we have this idea of artificial selection, it's basically humans deciding which genes or traits are going to be allowed to exist in the gene pool. So if you look at the corn that's on the side, the corn at the very beginning doesn't look like the corn that we see today. That's because we have selected certain types of genes over hundreds of years until corn kind of looks like what they are today. This type of artificial selection is basically done by all farmers, agriculturalists, dog breeders, florists, and animal productionalists. So basically, if you're a breeder or a farmer or a cultivator of animals or plants, you have willfully done some kind of artificial selection. Okay, nature hasn't decided to allow certain animals to survive here. It's basically based on human needs, desires, and consumptions. Now, when you look at these three images here, what do you think we're trying to get at in terms of GMOs? What do they all have in common? Well, you might actually think it has something to do with muscles. And for this particular example, that's kind of what we're looking at. So the term GMO, okay, let's just start with the basics. GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. So one of these three images here is based on an organism that has its genes altered or manipulated artificially in some way. Okay. Is it the first image here of the woman showing off her back muscles? Is it the image of this guy with his pet cow? Or is it this Ripley looking dude, okay, who seems to be like a championship bodybuilder? Which one has been genetically modified, if any? Well, this is the problem. Whether they're genetically modified or not, humans have usually viewed GMOs to be extremely negative. Okay. So in recent years, GMOs have been viewed negative by the media, okay, but GMOs are not actually bad. Now, sometimes the companies that do endorse GMOs, they might be questionable in terms of their ethics, okay, their business model, how they run things. So a good example of this is Monsanto. A lot of you may have heard of that particular company, okay, and maybe some of you haven't, but this company has been thought of a lot of people as being totally evil. And when you hear Monsanto, unfortunately, a lot of people also associate that name with GMOs. So what have you heard about GMOs? Okay, are they good? Are they something that you should avoid? Are they dangerous? Well, let's go back to our earlier question here. The GMO that we're talking about is the middle image here. This cow is most likely a genetically modified organism. Okay. Don't know that for sure. Okay, just know that we don't often see cows this muscular, okay, compared to normal-looking cows. But then again, the same argument can be made for humans. You normally don't see bodybuilders looking this muscular compared to a regular human, right? So it's not the end product that is the concern. Okay, it's how you reach that particular end product. And in terms of Monsanto, okay, the science that they're doing is actually good science for GMOs, but how they promote it and how they use it and their business model and what the media thinks is something that's totally different. What does it mean? So what does it all mean? Why is there this big problem? Okay. If we just break it down to the science, and that's pretty much what I'm here for, I'm going to present you the science. I will present the pros and cons in terms of what the media is suggesting, but ultimately you guys will have to decide whether or not GMOs is good or bad. Okay. But the science is any animal, plant, bacteria, and or living organism that has DNA can be artificially selected, changed, or altered. That's what GMOs are. Okay. Now, I have artificially selected here because, again, humans deciding which genes go into gene pool, that's not natural either. But no one seems to mind that. So here's a little test for you. Can you tell which one of these is a GMO? We have some nice looking corn. We have some watermelon. And we have some strawberries. Which one is the GMO? Have you made a decision? Well, this one is the GMO, the watermelon here. But also this one, the corn. And yep, you guessed it, so is the strawberry. But it doesn't mean that every corn, watermelon, and strawberry that you buy at the grocery store is a GMO. Okay, it's just that in this case, these ones here could be GMOs. Let's try this one. Which one of these three are GMOs? Is it the mouse? Is it the insulin? Or is it these little tropical fish? The mouse in this case is just a cute little mouse. The insulin is actually a GMO. Okay? It's a GMO product, meaning that the insulin that's made has been created from a genetically modified bacteria. And in case of the fish, these are special types of fish called glowfish. They were basically made by combining the genes of a jellyfish to the genes of a zebrafish. If you want more information about glowfish, I'll try and provide you a link so that you can click on it and then listen to how glowfish are made and basically, what they're kind of like. They're actually pretty cool. Human influences. Humans have been manipulating genes since the invention of agriculture, like I said before. This particular lettuce, okay, or cabbage, I don't know, I'm not really a plant eater, but it is huge, okay, compared to what you would normally find at a grocery store. But the thing is, this is not a GMO. This was actually grown. It's like those giant pumpkins that you see on Halloween. Sometimes they're just really that big, or they've grown that big because humans have been selecting large pumpkins over many, many, many generations. So some of these pumpkins will tend to grow larger and larger and larger. So this is basically a form of selective breeding where farmers pick the genes that they want in a particular organism. GMOs is really not that much different from selective breeding. It's just that with GMOs, you can be more precise instead of being random. So for example, all these vegetables here, farmers have to pick and select the biggest and best out of their crops, and they'll take their seeds and keep growing them year after year until they eventually produce the biggest and the best. So they select these genes that appear more or less at random. But with GMOs, you don't have to wait that long because you're not picking them from a random assortment. If you know where to go in the DNA, we can basically select the DNA itself, the gene itself, without actually going through the whole random process of selective breeding. So I'll include this particular video in Google Classroom as well. It's actually pretty interesting. It talks about what foods look like back a few decades ago for some. For others, it might have been a few centuries ago, but they definitely look different from foods that we have today. Okay. So where did the first GMOs originate? It actually wasn't that long ago. Does anyone know what type of fruit this is? If you said papaya, you are correct. GMOs was first, I guess, invented, okay, based on a process that scientists were using to treat an infected papaya plant. By genetically modifying the DNA of the infected papaya plant, the GMO papaya became very resistant against a deadly viral strain. This viral strain, if they left untreated, would have destroyed all productions of the papaya plant, and basically the entire papaya industry would have collapsed. So again, I will provide a video for that particular story about the papaya plant in Google Classroom. Now, since the first genetically modified organism, there has been many GMOs on the products today. So the global market is filled with GMOs. It's just that without proper labeling, it's almost impossible to tell if something has been genetically modified. So this is the part that I also agree with too. I do believe in GMOs, but I also believe that people have the right to know what it is that they're eating. Okay. Most European countries do actually have labels for their genetically modified foods. Okay. Basically, they're just required to let people know if a particular food item or product has been genetically altered in some way. They're not necessarily saying that it's a bad product, okay, if it's basically a GMO. But again, people would like to know. It just sounds like it's a bad thing, because if you were given two options to eat something that's GMO or something that is GMO free, what would you pick? I think most of you might actually pick the GMO free. Even if you had no idea what GMOs are, you're probably saying, oh, okay, well, if they're going through the hassle of telling me that it doesn't have GMOs, that must be even better. And that's the problem. Okay. The problem is people will misinterpret what GMOs actually are. They will actually associate with something that's bad when GMO is actually a good thing. Okay, and we'll go through again the list of pros and cons between GMOs and GMO-free products. But at the end of the day, I think it's good that people still have the freedom of choice. It's just that in Canada, we are not required, or at least under Canadian law, it's not required for companies to label their products as GMO or GMO-free. It's actually voluntary. So if a company is creating GMO products, they don't have to let people know that it's GMO. Now, there's really no law that says that you have to label something as GMO free, but again, if you had the choice between choosing something that's GMO and GMO free, a lot of people would probably go for GMO free. So if something that doesn't contain GMOs in the first place, let's say water, if I had a glass of water that is just labeled GMO free, which is technically true, people would probably go for that particular water over regular water. It makes no difference which ones they pick, but it's the conception. Okay? People perceive GMO free as being better. Okay? And that's something that we really would like to change. So, in Canada, there's no law that requires people to label their GMO products, and there's also no law that stops people from labeling their products as GMO free, as long as they actually are GMO free. Well, this is it for part 1. In the next series of videos, we'll continue on with the GMO discussion, and we'll go through some of the pros and cons of GMOs, and we'll talk about what Monsanto did in terms of giving GMOs a bad name. Thank you for listening, guys. See you soon.